that I'll be talking about, I don't want to bore you. You've got a good understanding of when I say something that makes sense. So the first one we're going to cover is interest rate, which is essentially the price of you borrowing your money. The higher the rate, the higher the cost of borrowing. And actually, currently, if you're thinking about buying right now, we are at the lowest the interest rates have ever been in Canada. They actually they have not gotten any better than they are right now. So the ability to purchase with a low interest rate is great. Now, the second one being is term and amortization. So these definitions are often used interchangeably, but they mean two different things. So if you think about it, term is like the contract that you're in with the lender. It can range from anywhere from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, or 10-year terms. And you can switch lenders with no penalty after your term is up. The most common term in Canada is a 5-year term. That seems to be the best combination of rate and as well as security in terms of getting a good mortgage. So right now you can lock in an interest rate at an insanely low rate right now and have that for the next 5 years if you choose. Amortization is the amount of time it's going to take you to pay off the mortgage. So when you hear amortization, just replace that with the words pay off. So if you have a 25-year amortization mortgage, it means you would pay off the mortgage in 25 years. Now, you can have many different terms throughout the life of the mortgage, but the amortization will go down as you pay it. So if you start with a 25-year amortization, after 5 years, you would have 20 years left paying off the mortgage at the same pace, essentially. Now, mortgage terms can be paid either with a variable or a fixed mortgage payment. The variable payment can go up or down throughout the term, and your payment will go up or down as well. The Bank of Canada meets 8 times a year to discuss the overnight lending rate or their policy rate, which would then mean that the banks would move their variable mortgage or their prime rates up or down based on what the Bank of Canada decides. Now, it's typically 8 times a year, but this year they had like 3 emergency meetings and they decreased the mortgage, their policy rate 3 times. Now that's, I mean, obviously because of the pandemic, and we don't expect that that's going to be something that's going to happen all the time, but we do believe that in the next couple of years, the interest rates, that prime rate will come back up. So now you can switch between variable. A lot of people ask me this. So what if I go variable because the rate is lower up front? Can I switch it to fixed? And you can switch it to fixed, but it won't be at the same, you don't lock in the variable rate that you have at that time. And you don't lock in the fixed rate that would have been available when you booked your mortgage. You take whatever is available off the rack, essentially. So you don't get any sort of special discount. You just get whatever that fixed rate happens to be. And it is always going to be higher than what you would pay with your variable. So I always suggest if you're going to go variable, just stick to your guns, go variable, stick it out for the term. If you're going to go fixed, then just be satisfied with you've got the same payment for the next 5 years. I'm just going to take a water. So now, an open mortgage is like a line of credit. So you can, so open or closed. So open mortgage is like a line of credit. You can pay as much as you want without incurring a penalty, and you can pay off the entire mortgage at any time. Now that sounds great, right? Well, why wouldn't I do that for all my mortgages? And a lot of people say, well, because the interest rate is actually higher for an open mortgage than it is with like a closed 5-year fixed mortgage. Now it gives you some ability to pay it up, pay it off faster, but you can only do it up to 80% of the property value. If you have questions on that, I'm happy to talk to you about that. But a closed mortgage is the typical mortgage that you might pay. You might have a closed mortgage that is, is like a 5-year fixed or a 5-year variable, but it's closed. You only can pay it off at certain times. Now you can pay off portions of it without a penalty, but to pay off the entire thing, then you're going to pay a penalty to do that. The last one I want to cover is kind of related to a line of credit and a standard mortgage. So a standard, most mortgages in history and right now are typically standard charge mortgages. Now we're getting into some nerdier type of mortgage terms here, so try to stick with me. This is the last one. But a standard mortgage is typically how a mortgage is paid down. So you pay down the mortgage and the amount of the charge or the mortgage goes down as well. With a collateral charge mortgage, that means that the mortgage is tied to the property value, but it doesn't go down as you pay down your mortgage. You're able to have it readvanced in other products like Visa cards or lines of credit, and they can essentially lend you more money. Now, most big bank mortgages now are collateral charge mortgages. Now, because it gives them that ability to offer you more products, or it does offer you, it also gives them more legal rights as well. So I hope that helps. I just wanted to cover a few of those. If you do have any questions about any of that, please feel free to put, I know I've got a couple people watching on Instagram. Feel free to ask any questions on Instagram and I'll try to cover them, as well as if you have a question, put it in the Q&A, put it in the Zoom chat. If you'd like to join, if you're on Instagram, check out my profile link and you can join to see the slides that I'm covering there as well, if you would like. So I think this is probably why most people are here. This is the how much can I afford section of the webinar. And certainly people, this is why you come. So here we go. I've got some great rules of thumb and some easy things that you can do, maybe some mental arithmetic to try to figure out, okay, roughly how much my budget might be. So obviously this isn't a quote, and I highly recommend that you get pre-approved and we talk and we figure that out. But these are the different aspects that I would go through when I'm talking to somebody for the first time, as I'm trying to, get a rough gauge on how much somebody might qualify for. I'm doing these rules of thumb in my head. So now, as a new Canadian, you need to be employed with a full-time job to qualify for a mortgage. That being said, there are exceptions to be made. So but people under contract typically need to be under contract for 2 years. Now, a lot of high-tech jobs, computer jobs, they tend to be contracts. So there is some wiggle room here. Ideally for me, you're a salaried employee. It's just way easier, but there are some exceptions to be made if you're under a contract, okay? And if you are, send me a message and we will get that sorted out and figure out what makes sense for you. So these are the rules of thumb that I use when I'm starting to speak to somebody. First one is just to give you a sense of how much you might be able to afford. You would take the household income and multiply it by 5. And that's roughly going to be the mortgage amount that you're going to be able to get approved for. Now, if you add the down payment, that's roughly going to be your budget or what you're going to be able to purchase. If you have 20% down, then we also may be able to look at income times 6. Now, we can do that because we use a longer amortization, meaning 30-year amortization, which means you will pay it off over a longer period of time, but it will also lower your payments. So we can qualify you for a little bit more money. So this is one of the examples where it makes sense. Okay, in a lot of senses, if you're a first-time home buyer and you can get a 20% down payment, you get used to making those payments a little bit easier. It's a little bit lower of a payment with a 30-year amortization. Okay. Another rule to consider is the amount of debt commitments that you have. So now, you can fit some debt commitments on top of the mortgage. It's not going to affect how much you might qualify for. Now, for example, you could probably include a car loan or a student loan. It's when you have multiple commitments, multiple payments that you're making, that it starts to reduce that purchasing power. Now, the more income you make, the less these things matter. The more you can qualify for more and still get some other debt commitments under there. So I actually had a conversation with a client this week where I thought, okay, it looks like he's going to get approved for about $500,000 mortgage. So, I thought this is great. He had good credit, good income. But unfortunately, he had child support payments that were almost $1,600 per month. So he hadn't included that in his initial calculations when he's using the online calculators and trying to figure things out. And so it turned out that he would get approved almost $200,000 less than what he had budgeted. So it was a huge, it was not great. Unfortunately, it was pretty disappointing. But the rule of thumb is to use about $400 per month is roughly the equivalent of $100,000 less in mortgage. And as I said, you can fit some of them under there, but it's when you start to add them on top, like this gentleman did or had to do, that was what made the difference. So $400 per month in loans is roughly the equivalent of $100,000 less. Also, the equivalent of how much debt you have outstanding is roughly every $13,000 in credit card debt or unsecured line of credit debt is roughly the equivalent of $100,000 in mortgage money that you wouldn't get as well, which is kind of sad, unfortunately. Now, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, put them in the Zoom webinar chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. If you have questions on Instagram, feel free to put them on there and I'll happily answer your questions as well. Now, the other one I want you to think about, and this is less of a rule of thumb for how much you qualify for as much as like how much the payments are going to be. Now, this might be a little less now because rates are lower, but it's just easier than doing 475 times per month. So the math in my head is a little easier, but roughly every $100,000 in mortgage is roughly the equivalent of about $500 per month in payments. So obviously that's not a quote, that's not exactly how much you're going to qualify for, but it just gives you a sense of, okay, here's how much on my budget, here's how much it might cost. I hope those rules of thumb were helpful. I hope that gave you a good sense of roughly how much you're going to qualify for. I'm going to move into another section talking about some of the different aspects for people who are new to Canada, but these are my different rules of thumb. So I hope you found that helpful. Okay, so non-resident speculation tax. So this was a bit of a thorn in our side 3 years ago. They introduced this as part of the 16-point, what is it called? 16-point fair housing plan. That's what it was. So basically, specifically in Toronto area, the prices of real estate in 2017 were increasing rapidly. Like I'm talking like 30% month over month. It was nuts. People were like day trading their houses. They would buy it 1 month, and before they even took possession of it, they'd sell the right to buy the house for like $100,000 less. I wish I was exaggerating, but I tell you, it was absolutely crazy. So at that time, the Ontario government decided that this is not sustainable, which it wasn't. It wasn't healthy for the economy. And so they implemented the Ontario Fair Housing Plan, which included these 16 measures to try to calm the market. Now, the crown jewel of the different steps was to implement a 15% non-resident speculators tax on all home purchases in the greater Golden Horseshoe. And I've got the map up here right now. That is a humongous area. Basically, like on the far corners of that's probably a 2-hour drive or 2.5-hour drive to Toronto. So what they did is it meant that if you bought a home and you were not a permanent resident or a citizen of Canada, that you'd be taxed 15% of the purchase price. And so if you can imagine, $1 million property would include $150,000 tax on at closing. So now you are exempt, as I said, if you are a permanent resident or if you are married to a permanent resident or a citizen. And you can get it back, but it's just a lot of money to have to spend on the purchase price. Kwesi asked me a question: how does the new first-time incentive program with the federal government work? It doesn't work very well at all, Kwesi, unfortunately. It is, if you, that program, and I don't even actually talk about it in this webinar anymore because it's just not something that works well in Toronto. It is, so basically how it works is you can get approved for a mortgage up to 4 times your, they will give you a maximum mortgage 4 times your income up to a maximum of $120,000. So the maximum mortgage you can get is $480,000, and then they will give you 5% of the purchase price. That does not buy you a whole lot here in Toronto, and that's if you have the maximum that you can do. If you make $121,000 household, then you are, you can't qualify for that program. If you have questions on that one, send me a note. It's not that great of a program for people who are new to Canada or first-time home buyers or really anybody. It does have its spots where it can work in interesting situations, but it's not a great program. So that was a question from Instagram. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to post them anywhere in the Zoom chat or the Q&A, and I will definitely get to them. So now say that you are a first-time home buyer and you are somebody who has their temporary placement, but you still want to buy a place because you're going to be you're going to be a Canadian very soon, or you're going to be a permanent resident. So it is possible to get a rebate for non-residents, but it's based on either becoming a permanent resident within 4 years. You can now you can also get it if you're a student and you're in a full-time enrollment for 2 years. Then you can get the rebate. Also, if you are a foreign national and you've worked here full-time for 1 year. So the reason that these are exemptions is it's meant for people who are going to come here and use the properties. What was happening is that people were buying from other countries, they were investing in Canada, which is great, but then the homes would just sit vacant. And so we have a huge supply problem right now. And so they're looking to, you're looking to essentially get people just to be living in their homes, so we get more supply on the market, and help with the demand essentially. So that's how you can apply. You can apply for a rebate after at least a year if you are working full time, after 2 years if you're a student, or as soon as you get your PR. I always recommend to people to get the PR first if you can. It just costs so much money to, on top of your mortgage, to qualify, or on top of your down payment. I just find that it doesn't make sense for a lot of people. Okay, so let's do another poll. I've got a credit related poll. This is my favorite one of the night, actually. I love to check people's knowledge on what they know. I'll read them along for people who are on Instagram as well. I'm going to launch it here for my group on Zoom. So the questions are for everyone following along: true or false, checking your credit will lower your credit score. Feel free to put in your answer there. Question 2, what percentage of your credit limit can be used month to month without affecting your credit score? The answers are 100% can be used. Second is your credit score goes down every time you use your credit card. And third is less than 15% should be used month to month. So let's see what kind of answers that we have coming up here. I've got a couple more. I'll give you another couple minutes. It's almost everybody. Or not minutes, seconds, I should say. Sorry for anybody that thought they had more time. So we had true or false, checking your credit will lower your credit score. That is 100% false, and 100% of people got that right. I think that is the first time that has ever happened to me where everybody's answered it. So either of these people are all very bright on how your credit works, or they've seen my webinars before. So the next question was, what percentage of your credit limit can be used month to month without affecting your credit score? So the answer is, I'm going to share the results here. So the answer is less than 50% can be used month to month. So that's good. If you start using more than your credit of 50%, then that's going to have a negative effect. So it looks like you're overutilizing it. You need to use it. And so I've got this great credit wheel here that we can discuss. This is how your credit score is generated. I know as a new Canadian that this is something that many people want to make sure that they have established their credit. I find a lot of people have questions about this, specifically new Canadians, because you're trying to make sure that your credit score is high as possible so you can buy homes and you can do other things. But you can see the green section here. Let me see if I can get, my pointer here. Okay, I gotta go back. Okay, so the green section is the accumulation of debt. So this is the number of credit score checks. This is the percent. This is how many inquiries you've had, as well as how often you've opened it. But that only makes up 10% of your total credit, which is out of 900. So it's now, one way that you can affect this is if you are checking your credit if you're checking your credit for your mortgage, it's very little impact on your credit. If you were to check it with me, check it with as a mortgage broker, and then again at the bank, it's considered to be one event within 45 days and has no effect on your credit score. Now, if you look like you were looking to maybe collect credit, maybe you went to Home Depot and you want to buy a new tool. I don't know, I assume everybody's buying tools, and maybe you want to buy a new tool and they buy it on credit, and you open a credit check that way, and then you buy a new car on credit, and you buy furniture for your nice new place on credit. That will have more of an effect because it's treated as individual checks, but it's still only up to 10% of your total credit score, and your credit score is over 900. So the maximum you can seek your credit by just checking your credit is 90 points. Okay, but for a mortgage, it's not an issue. Now, the red section of the credit wheel, as you may have noticed here, is much larger than the green section, and that's your capacity to borrow. So that's the percentage of your credit that is being used month to month. Now, ideally, as I mentioned, you want to keep your credit balance under about 50% of your limit month to month. Also, an even bigger factor than the percentage of your credit is your payment history. So how often you're paying your credit. You want to pay all of your credit checks all the time, right on time. So the more often you pay on time, the less you have to use your credit, the better that it's going to be. That makes up 65% of your total credit score. Now, the length of credit, so it's actually your oldest credit sources that actually are working the hardest for you. So the longer your credit card is open, the better. So don't cancel that old credit card that you have, just cut it up, throw it in your desk, or do whatever. But that is actually helping you with building your credit score. And so the mix of credit is another one, the purple section here. So purple meaning so that the more installment, like a car loan, is going to help you raise your credit score, versus like revolving, meaning like credit cards, that would lower your score. Yeah, so that's the credit wheel. If you have any questions on that, feel free to enter them in the webinar chat or in the Q&A. I'd be happy to do that. I know this is often an area that people want to make sure they've got the great credit so they can buy a home, but there's some myths out there that or some things that people don't know that are affecting them without them knowing. All right. So now let's see the next one. So some people come to Canada and they're ready to buy right away, but maybe you haven't fully established your credit here in Canada. And so this is something that's pretty common with new immigrants, people that have come here, have limited document. Yeah, so yes, a couple of questions. I'll try to get on them as we go here. But essentially, there's different ways that we can prove your credit history and still buy a home with as little as 5% down. So we may be able to provide an international credit report. We may be able to provide 12 months of bank statements, utility bills with your name on it, a letter from your landlord, letter from a bank. There's different things that we can do that can help you to increase, to prove your credit, even though it's maybe not as established as they would like here in Canada. So I've got a couple of questions here. So do you mean a car loan would raise my credit score? Yeah, the longer you have your credit, like a car loan, paying that month to month would, because you're making regular payments, you're showing a history of making regular payments, that raises your credit score. Or it strengthens your overall credit profile. Second, how hard is it to get a mortgage if one of the clients is currently paying off a consumer proposal? If you have a huge down payment, it's not too much of an issue, but you want to be exiting consumer proposal. You want to get it over with. For somebody with a minimum credit, minimum down payment, it's not worth it. It's not going to happen at all. I hope that helps. Any other credit related questions? Feel free to feel free to answer them anytime. So I'm just going to dismiss these. Okay. Right. So down payment. So there are a lot of very specific rules for down payment. I've got a poll on this, another poll. I'll put it up here. So there are a lot of very specific things. So that I'm going to cover off because there's some rules being new to Canada that we have to credit. You may be bringing money from back home. You want to make sure that that's done correctly. So we'll answer those, and I've got a couple polls for everybody as well. If you're watching on Instagram, how many months of bank statements do you need to show for a down payment? And second is, how long does money need to be in Canada to be used for a down payment? Okay, so a couple people answered, a couple ready to go here. I'm going to let it go for another 5 seconds, and I'm going to end the polling. Based on the responses, I'm guessing that not everybody knows these answers, like we're on the credit. So I ended it. So basically your rules are the bank needs to see a 90-day history of your down payment. So that includes the deposits from each of the accounts that you're transferring money to and from. You need to be able to show the 90-day history. Any large deposits, we need to be able to track back where that came from. Also, money needs to be in Canada at least 30 days before closing. This isn't a Sean Humphreys rule. This isn't a individual bank rule. This is a Bank of Canada anti-money laundering law. So we need to make sure that that money is there. I know a lot of people have some misconceptions about how long money needs to be in Canada or how long it needs to be in your bank account. I've heard this from tons of different people, in the mortgage as well as real estate industry. I'm like, you mean I thought it had to be in a bank account for 90 days. It does not need to be in one bank account. It needs to be in Canada for 30 days, and we need to show a 90-day history of where the money has been, essentially. So one time I actually had somebody that had to, actually had to move their closing date because the money wasn't here. They got it in like 28 days before closing, and they needed to move that closing date out 2 days in order to accommodate that. So that was unfortunate, but yeah, that's how it goes for the Bank of Canada anti-money laundering laws. Feel free to ask any questions, and I will get to them as well. Okay, so minimum down payments. I usually like this slide to slide in a little bit here, but we'll just do it like this. So the minimum down payments on purchases under $500,000 or less is 5% down, so $25,000. Now, if you're purchasing a property with between 500 and less than $1 million, you need 5% of the first 500,000, and then you need 10% of the balance. So if that was a $650,000 purchase, a lot of people are looking in the $650 to $850 range. So say you're purchasing for $650, it's $25,000 for the first 500, and then it is $15,000 for the next 150. So a minimum down payment of $40,000. But I'll cover this first. So, and if you're buying over $1 million, you need to have at least 20% down. The higher you go up, the more down payment. If you're purchasing at 2 million or 2.5 million, you're going to need more than 20% down in a lot of cases. There are some lenders that will accommodate that, but that's a pretty big mortgage to pay as well. So Now, one of the other things to keep in mind, if you're purchasing with less than 20% down, you need to show at least 1.5% of the purchase price in closing costs. So if you're buying at $700,000, you're going to need to show 1.5% of the purchase price. So that would be $10,500. You need to show that in closing costs. That's on top of your down payment. So 700 would be a minimum of, you would need 45,000 plus another 10,500. So you'd actually need a minimum of $55,500 to qualify. I've got a couple of examples after this we can take a look at as well. Now, a lot of people are worried about getting to that 20% down as that's their starting point, because they're worried about paying the mortgage default insurance, which, you know, a lot of people refer to CMHC insurance, but there are actually two other mortgage default insurers as well. But it can help to get that. You know, it definitely helps you save some money. But if you are saving and you're a long ways off from trying to chase down that down payment, the housing market is going to continue to go up. I know everybody's excited because they think that the market is going to go down. That is not the case. Over last year, June is up 12% from the previous year. No, we're still in the middle of the pandemic, but the housing market is as hot as the weather is right now. We're really not going to see that drop off. So if it is hard to get to 20%, it is worth it to pay the default insurance and start to get some of that price appreciation, start building that equity. And that's where you're going to make your money up. I hope that sense, you know, that kind of makes sense in terms of that line of thinking. Any questions, feel free to ask. We can chat about that. If you're close or you're not really sure what you should do, we can definitely put a plan together to say, okay, here's how much it's going to cost you, and here's where it might make sense to do it. Okay. So some different property examples. I took a few property examples. I'll just walk you through them. These are not actively for sale, but you know, they're an example of some of the properties that may have been for sale over the last few months. So this property here, purchase price of $580,000, you know, essentially a bachelor or a junior, I don't know what you call these, you know, no bedrooms, one bathroom, pretty small place. You know, the purchase price is $580,000. So your minimum down payment on this is going to be $33,000. So 33,000, 5% to the first 500, 10% of 80,000, which is 8. So that's 33,000. The mortgage is going to be $568,800. And you think, well, how is that possible? It's 580. I'm putting 33 down. It's because of the mortgage default insurance, which is 21,800. So that gets added on to the mortgage. The payment on this mortgage is going to be roughly $2,650 per month. Keep in mind, I have not updated these for like the lowest possible rate we have right now. I'm just trying to give you a sense of how much that might cost. Taxes on the property, and as well there's maintenance fees because it's not a freehold, it is a condo. So there's going to be taxes and fees of roughly $500 per month as well. And I should also mention, the higher these, you know, the higher the taxes and the fees, the less mortgage that you're going to qualify for. So if you find a property, somebody was looking at one today, maintenance fees were $900. You know, taxes can be another $400. That's going to lower the amount because you can't pay, you still have to pay all of those debt commitments. Now, the carrying costs, if you add up the taxes, the fees, the mortgage, that's going to be roughly $3,150 per month with a minimum down payment of $33,000. In order to qualify, you probably need an income somewhere around $115,000, you know, give or take somewhere around there. Obviously, this takes into account no other debt commitments. You don't have any other car payments or credit cards. That is just the income that you would need with no other commitments. Okay. Now, well, what if I've got 20% down, right? So 20% down is $116,000 of a $580,000 mortgage or property, sorry. So the mortgage would be $464,000. You do not need to pay mortgage default insurance. It is $0 because you've got 20% down. And the payment would be $2,225. If you want to calculate the mortgage insurance cost, because it's fun to do, there is a chart that you can use. Basically, is if you have 5% down of a purchase price, you're looking at 4% of the mortgage amount as your mortgage default insurance. And then it tiers down from there. So at 10% down is 3.1%, and at 15% is 2.8% of the mortgage amount. And that just gets added onto the mortgage. Since there's 20% down on this one, you don't need to worry about that. You've got a payment of $225 per month. The taxes and fees are still $500. Your carrying costs are $2,725 per month, and your income needs a minimum of $95,000, taking into account no other debt commitments that you might have. Okay, so how about this private property? Maybe you've got a little bit more. Maybe you would need 20% down on this. Maybe you're looking for a semi-detached or detached home that would be in the $1.1 million range. So the minimum down payment on this is going to be $220,000. Your mortgage would be $880,000, and the insurance is $0, of course, because you've got more than 20% down. The mortgage payment on this is going to be roughly $4,200 per month. Taxes $400 per month, and the carrying cost would be $4,600 per month. And the minimum income you would need would be $170,000. So if you and maybe a spouse, two people are buying, maybe you make, one person makes $70,000, the other makes $100,000, and you've got a really, a good down payment. This would be something that would probably be in your price range. If you've got a larger down payment, say you've got 35% down, you've maybe bringing some money back home, or you just have a lot of money, $385,000 is the minimum down payment. The mortgage would be $715,000, $0 for the insurance, and the payment would roughly be $3,400 per month. And if you're paying, playing along at home and doing your mental calculations, that $500 per month for every $100,000, you can kind of see that playing out here. Roughly, 7 times 5 would be $3,500, but just to give you a rough ballpark where you might end up. Taxes on the property are $400 per month, and the carrying cost would be $3,800 per month. The minimum income that you would need for this would be $140,000. Now, the average salary in Toronto is $70,000. So if two people making an average salary, with 35% down, you could look at a property in the $1.1 million range. Okay, I've got a few different slides to go through. So closing costs, I'm going to kind of move through these pretty quickly. But if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. So there are closing costs before closing. So these are some things that might come up. You might want to pay for a home inspection. You might want to pay for status certificates. If you're buying a condo, you might want to see what the financial health of the corporation is. Maybe they've underfunded their reserve and they need to fix the roof. Well, where is that going to come from? Well, that's going to come from increased maintenance fees as you go along. Now, you may also need to pay for an appraisal at some times. I know some people are like, well, no, all the appraisals are always covered. There is always an appraisal that happens, but it's not always covered by the lenders. So sometimes, in some cases, you will need to pay an appraisal, roughly $400 per month. And you also need to get your fire or property insurance set up ahead of time as well, which depends on you, depends on the property. I didn't put a number attached to that. So due at closing, so these are a variety of different closing costs. So you may be getting CMHC or mortgage default insurance. You'll need to pay the PST, or about 8% of the mortgage default insurance at closing. Lawyers' fees can be around $2,000 per month, or not per month. I always say that at this point. I say per month so many times. And lawyers' fees are $2,000. That's a flat cost. You don't have to pay them every month. That's something that you will need to pay, not to me, the mortgage broker, but to your lawyer to help you set that up. You also have land transfer tax. So if you're buying a property in Toronto proper, then you're paying Toronto land transfer tax and you're paying the Ontario land transfer tax. If you're buying in Milton or Pickering or Markham, they don't have that tax. So there's only the one that you need to pay. I also have an app, by the way. If you send me an email, I'll send you a link to the app, and you can use that to calculate land transfer tax and all the different closing costs. Also, if the property you are purchasing, if they have paid all of the property tax for the year already, you would need to pay them back their prepaid taxes that they've paid, because they've already taken care of that for you. And as well, the non-resident speculation tax. Hopefully nobody's paying this, but that's something that is due at closing. Other costs to keep in mind were moving costs. Maybe you're paying for 3 men in a truck, or maybe you're paying your strong friends with pickup trucks and with beer and pizza. That's up to you on how much that might cost. There are maintenance fees that you're going to pay every month. There's property tax, there's utilities, paying the water bill, the heating bill, anything like that. Now we've covered all of the costs. Now we can talk about some rebates and credits for you. So the land transfer rebate, as a first-time home buyer, you do not need to pay the entire amount. You get a rebate of $4,475 for the Ontario one and $4,000 for the Toronto one. So a total of $8,475 rebate. It's not something you pay and you get back. You just don't pay it at closing. Also, you can use up to $35,000 in your from your RSPs tax-free. So if you sock some money away in your RSPs and you'd like to take it out, you are not taxed as income like you would be if you weren't using it for your home. If you're just pulling it out, then you can use it as an RSP, or you can use it towards the down payment. Also, there is a federal tax credit of $5,000 that your accountant will help you take care of. And there is a new housing rebate for pre-construction. So you don't have to pay some of the GST and HST. So I often get asked this too. So that's great. This is great information, but what are the steps to purchasing? So the first one is you want to get pre-approved. So this is something where I can help you put together a plan. We can get a rate locked in for up to 120 days, and we can get you all sorted out on your mortgage. You can go out and buy something. Now, when you're ready to do that, you go with your realtor, you make an offer to purchase, and eventually, maybe not the first time, but you'll get accepted on your offer. And you'll find the perfect property that you're going to live in. So when you do that, after that, your realtor or you is going to send me the documents. You're going to send me the listing. You're going to send me the agreement of purchase and sale. And then we're going to take that and submit that with all of your other documents to a lender. And I should also mention, in the pre-approval step, I like to do a lot of that work up front. I like to gather the documents. I like to take a look at the credit. I like to really uncover as many of the different issues up front. Whatever could come up, I like to make sure that we're sorting that out ahead of time before you start making offers. Also, the next step is to sign with me, and then you sign with a lawyer. And once you've signed at the lawyer's office, then you are done and you are a homeowner, and you'll pick up the keys likely, the day of closing, and then you can go in and enjoy the property. Okay. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. But I've got one more set of questions for you guys. I've got a survey. I'm going to launch that here. And just to let you know, my next webinar is actually next Wednesday. I'm hosting another first-time